Hey, I'm June. You might know me as Saturn in Honey. I am an astrologer, among other things, and I am bringing you grounded astrology for inner revolution in a world that is hell-bent on doing literally everything it can to keep us ungrounded. This is your survival guide for Mars retrograde in Leo from December 6th, 2024 till January 6th, 2025. The full length of Mars retrograde is from December 6th until February 23rd, but on January 6th, Mars will retrograde back into Cancer. So I want to focus just on this first leg of Mars retrograde. Like, let's get through this little bit of it and then we'll focus on the rest when the time comes. I'm going to go over the overall path of Mars retrograde, including the pre-shadow period, the overall vibes and major themes, the signs and other astrological groupings that are most likely to feel this transit the most, as well as remediation or how to get this transit to show up in a more positive way. In this video, I'm going to talk about like general remediation that will work for everybody, but on Substack, I also have horoscopes specific for each sign, along with a big list of remediations specific to each sign too, if you're interested in that. As I said, Mars will station retrograde in Leo on December 6th at 6 degrees Leo. It'll retrograde back into Cancer on January 6th. Then it will station direct on February 23rd at 17 degrees Cancer. If you have placements within the range of these degrees, you will be feeling this Mars retrograde. While Mars is retrograde in Leo, the people who are going to be feeling it the most are Aries and Scorpio because they are the Mars-ruled signs. Leo, especially Leo rising, as well as the other fixed risings, Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio. Fixed signs with placements between 0 degrees and 9 degrees. Anyone who is in a Mars-ruled profection year, and anyone who is in a Leo profection year. The first thing to know about any retrograde is that a retrograde occurs when that planet is physically the closest to the Earth that it can be. So it's a little strange that we always interpret retrogrades as kind of like that planet is weak in some way. It's not that it's weak. Like, if you're closer to the heater, you're fucking warmer. Like, you're warmer. You can think of it as standing closer to the Marshall heater in this case. Or we can think of it as being like immersed in the depths of that planet. It's like we are so swallowed up by the energy of that planet, we can't see it from the outside anymore. We can't see the objective thing. We're just living the energy of that planet. While Mars is retrograde, we are very much immersed in Mars, if that makes sense. Sometimes while Mars is retrograde, things can move slower, things can be kind of frustrating. It takes Mars things and turns them inward, inside out, slows them down. We're reevaluating them. We're changing directions. Mars things include action, conflict, aggression, assertion, sex, vigor and passion, and like wanting to get up and like grab life by the reins. Injury sometimes, illness occasionally. So while Mars is retrograde, all these things are being reassessed, reviewed, redirected. We are immersed in their energy. We are able to approach them from a different perspective or from a different direction, just like the planet appears to be moving backwards through the sky. While Mars is retrograde, it can be a really great time to redirect your energy. Like, if what you're doing is just not aligned with your long-term goals in specific, this is a fantastic time to kind of make other plans or explore your other options. It's kind of an exploratory time, you know, like retrogrades are not necessarily the time to begin something ideally, but exploration, trying different things or returning to old things, 2 thumbs up. So here's the general timeline of Mars retrograde. Mars entered Cancer on September 4th and thus began the overarching story of this Mars retrograde period. On October 5th, Mars began its pre-retrograde shadow period. So that was when Mars got to 17 degrees Cancer. Therefore, it was at the farthest point that it will get to when it retrogrades back into Cancer. So that is when we started seeing inklings or suggestions of what we are going to be looking at long-term during this Mars retrograde, the things that we're going to be reviewing, redirecting, and all those things we just discussed. On November 3rd, Mars entered Leo, and that's when we began seeing some of the Mars retrograde in Leo hints. So think about what came up for you from October 5th through December 6th. Those are the things that can kind of hint at what your Mars retrograde experience is likely to be like. So then on December 6th, Mars stations retrograde at 6 degrees Leo. Then on December 12th, Mars opposes Venus in Aquarius. And then on January 3rd, Mars opposes Pluto in Aquarius. That'll also be in range from December 24th on, but it's exact on the 3rd of January. Then on January 6th, Mars retrogrades back into Cancer. Then further down the line, February 23rd, Mars stations retrograde at 17 degrees Cancer, and that is the end of the retrograde story. However, the post-retrograde shadow period doesn't end for quite some time after that. The post-retrograde shadow is how long it takes for Mars, or whatever planet's retrograde, to get from where it stations direct to the same degree that it stationed retrograde at to begin with. So when Mars gets back to the 6-degree point of Leo, where it was when it stations retrograde, that's not going to happen till May 2nd. So that's when the Mars retrograde shadow period ends and we're truly done with that retrograde story. Before that, Mars re-enters Leo on April 18th. Then on June 17th, Mars enters Virgo, and that is officially the end of this ridiculously long transit of Mars in Leo. Like, in 2023, Mars spent, I think it was 21 days in Leo. That's a really quick time for Mars. Usually it's about a month and a half in each sign. But this time is 6 times longer than it spent in this sign in 2023. In 2024 and 2025, we will be having 125 days of Mars in Leo between the beginning of it entering Leo on November 3rd and finally leaving Leo for good on June 17th of 2025. In order to understand what Mars retrograde in Leo is about, we have to understand what the archetype of Leo in general is about. So Leo is a fire sign. What do fire signs do? They are active, they create friction and movement, they are bright, exciting, and they allow us to see in the dark. That is one of the primary functions of fire in general. Leo is also a fixed sign, so it is like a steady, consistent, always warming flame. And to some extent, it's predictable. It's still a fire sign, and fire always has an element of unpredictable, but it's largely a consistent sign. It is also ruled by the sun. So all of this together essentially makes Leo the light that never goes out. It is extremely connected to light and visibility. And I mean light in a literal way, like let's illuminate. Like traditionally, the sun was associated with intellect and knowledge, because how do you see anything without light? You don't. The sun is even associated with the eye. Usually it's the right eye. So there's a lot of ties to vision when it comes to Leo. But Leo's association with light is also fairly figurative too. It's like Leo always likes to keep it light, keep it bright. Like, I'm just going to read you what I wrote about this on Substack because I'm not going to be able to say it any better than I already wrote it. Leo can sometimes be too attached to lightness, always wanting to make light of every situation, bring hope and inspiration to dark places and heavy hearts, spotlight others' great qualities and accomplishments, and save anyone in trouble. It feels good to be loved by a Leo. They often genuinely just want to make life better and will do a lot for the people they love. But Leo can take their connection to light too far, forever avoiding the darker, heavy parts of life until those parts have consumed them, or trying to save someone from their own heavy heart, forcing them into faux positivity before they're ready. Leo can live life searching for spotlights of recognition and validation, big and small, hoping that something or someone will make the growling reality of our human mortality quieter, or quiet the gnawing burn of the innate internal human darkness that the world shames all of us for having. Leo can too easily make light of their pain, finishing up a moment of vulnerability with a laugh or a "but everything's great," and never letting others see that they are truly aching and in need of support and care. They can appear to be inhumanly glistening, golden, and joyous all the time, to the point that other people struggle to relate. But it's warm in the spotlight, and then it's awfully cold backstage. This Mars retrograde will emphasize this. It will bring the darker dimensions of Leo out: hierarchy, untouchability, overconfidence, ego, deep insecurity, judgment, bending over backwards in hopes of being liked, intense anger and even bitterness, fear of being seen in one's wholeness, the good and the bad, concepts of royalty and celebrity, and the hidden shards of broken glass inside that golden heart. Mars retrograde in Leo brings us backstage, and there it can be cold and dark. And we've seen this come up in really interesting ways in the days even leading up to Mars stationing retrograde in Leo. We have seen the conflict between like the people who are high up on the hierarchy and like the everyday people, or the people who are out on the fringes. And this speaks heavily to the opposition between Mars retrograde in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. This is something that's going to be really potent. Pluto just officially entered Aquarius. We're going to see a lot of division and the everyday people really pushing back against the people who sit atop the hierarchical pyramid. Celebrities are probably not going to have a great time during the month of December and into early January. We're not too thrilled. On personal and collective levels as well, Mars retrograde can also coincide with like kind of strange conflicts. It can be a rise in conflicts, though I find that more often It's an opportunity to resolve conflicts, especially long-standing ones, but it could be more violence, more stress, just kind of like a messiness, you know, relating to Mars things. Can be anger, scary world events, upper back pain, or generally feeling down, like the light has simply left us. I also think a lot of people will want to get away from social media at this time, in the same way that like visibility can be kind of uncomfortable while Mars is retrograde in Leo. Maybe we're reevaluating how visible we want to be, or how we want to be excuse me, how we want to be seen in the world at large. Maybe some people want to spend more time at home, or have to for one reason or another. There's just this feeling of like inward facing. We're moving inside, like turning things inside out. Things may feel in general a bit darker across the board while Mars is retrograde in Leo. If Leo is the sun, the light, brightness, you know, wanting to lighten up every situation, Mars retrograde in Leo is like inner light, inner guidance, inner fight, our personal vigor kept private, our internal guiding lights. This is an internal form of Mars in Leo. So this is more about reevaluating our relationship to light in perhaps even a literal way. Like, do you need to get away from screens? Do you need to spend more time sleeping? Do you need to simply shut your eyes and block out the racket and the flashing and constant advertisements of the world at large? Maybe. Or maybe you need to let more light in. Maybe you spend too much time in the dark, too much time isolated. That's one of the more difficult parts of the Aquarius archetype, the sign opposite to Leo. But at its best, Mars retrograde in Leo asks, who are you if no one's watching? Who would you be, or what would you do, or what would you say if you didn't have to worry that the authentic expression of the person that you are was going to render you like invalid or unlovable as a human being? Who would you be? It can be about returning to expression for the sake of expression, just pure expression, expressing because it feels good to express. It's also about coming back to what we authentically want to do, not what we are supposed to do, not what society expects us to do, not what any group we're part of expects or pushes or pressures us to do, but what actually lights us up and makes us want to live. Leo is associated with the heart, and the heart, I mean, we talk about that in like kind of the, I don't know, the cheesy way or whatever. But I also think of it in like a pretty literal way. Like the heart is the pump that like keeps the life flowing through us. You know? It's fascinating too, because Aquarius, the opposite sign, is associated with the circulatory system. So like Leo is the pump that like gets that blood flowing, and Aquarius is the system that brings it throughout the body, that circulates life. They need each other. They're worthless without each other. Even the heart like has this electromagnetic field that can be, I think it's like feet out from you or something. It can be measured, and it's an aura almost that like pulses with every beat of your heart. This is so beautifully representative of the nature of Leo, and how Leo, yeah, it acts from the heart and fights from the heart and fucks from the heart and wants to live like the heart wants to keep beating. In a sense, Leo is kind of the life force. It's like, what fuels you? That's the big question of this Mars retrograde, maybe above all else. I think all Mars retrogrades have some question of what fuels you, but this one is like, what fuels you? What makes you feel alive? What makes you want to live? What lights you up? What brings you joy? Those kinds of questions are the ones we're talking about. Those are the kinds of questions to focus on while Mars is retrograde in Leo. Now, whenever there is a transit that has the potential to be challenging, like this one, we may be feeling pretty low energy. Things may not be feeling great, might be feeling kind of dark. Maybe we're being taken down a peg. Maybe we're feeling really tired of the people who are higher up stepping on our fucking necks every day, or any number of other manifestations, as I've already discussed. Whenever there's a transit that may show up in a challenging way, there are things we can do to try to get that transit to show up in a more positive way. Like every planet just wants to express itself one way or another. So while Mars is retrograde in Leo, here are some things you can do to make this time feel a bit better for you, to give Mars retrograde in Leo a place to show up, or a ways to show up, so that it doesn't necessarily feel the need to show up in a particularly negative way in your life. A general rule across all Mars retrogrades is be mindful of your and others' energy levels, to get more rest, attempt to resolve old conflicts. That's just easier sometimes when Mars is retrograde. Like it doesn't have, I don't know, something's different. It's like you're approaching the conflict from a different angle than you normally can. During this time with Mars retrograde in Leo specifically, we might want to find the right balance of warmth and light versus cold and darkness, like spend time in both. I mean this again in literal and figurative ways. We can move slower, reevaluate, be patient, return to a hobby, game, or sport that you used to do in the past but haven't done in a while. This can be really, really good. Like a personal example, a couple of years ago, there was a Mars retrograde that was going to be really notable for me, and I basically spent that entire time just playing video games from my childhood. I played like Pokemon Stadium and Mario 64 on an old N64 system. I also spent a ton of time writing, and that like more internal form of Gemini rather than speaking out loud. I was doing written readings at that time, which eventually did become quite exhausting, but it was great for the first few months. I also got roller skates for the first time since I was a kid too. It went a lot better than I think it could have otherwise. You can also eat solar foods and herbs and whatever, like citrus fruits, chamomile, rosemary, saffron, chrysanthemum, etc. I would focus on the citrus fruits, chamomile, and chrysanthemum specifically if you are feeling like inflamed emotionally or like physically. Those are considered to be more cooling per traditional Chinese medicine. You can wear gold, orange, and yellow with black. Again, that balance of light and dark. It's like giving the sun its opportunity to shine while also keeping it balanced with the darkness and the internal focus of the retrograde, as well as that opposition to the planets in Aquarius, especially Pluto. We can keep carnations, sunflowers, and marigolds around. Those are solar flowers, just to kind of like bring the sun back in if things are feeling awfully dark at the time. We can do heart-opening visualizations or kind of just tend to your heart in whatever way, you know, like what does it need during this time? Upper back massages can be really good. Leo is associated with the upper back and the spine. And also have slow, animalistic, experimental sex. Like take that like lion part of Leo and bring that out of the cage a little bit. Leo is an interesting contradiction because it's this ruled by the sun. It wants to be like seen as like regal and spotless and even like godly, but it's also symbolized by a lion, which has, you know, like the energy of a lion can be that way as well. But ultimately, a lion is primal. It's, you know, it's eating a raw steak with your hands, you know, like that's Mars and Leo kind of vibes. Actually, no, a Mars and Leo who specifically always does that. Leaning into that side of Mars and Leo and trying like experimental things that are out of the ordinary, you know, like these interesting expressions of primal energy, whether that's sexual or something else, that can be really good for Mars retrograde in Leo. Also get some gentle exercise, bonus points for returning to a form of exercise you haven't done in a while. I recommend something kind of gentle though. Whenever Mars is retrograde, we may be more likely to get hurt, so be extra careful and know your limits. Also, again, I am not a doctor. I take no responsibility for your health. Please make sure that everything is safe for you before you try it. I cannot be responsible for your decisions. Maybe most importantly, handle conflict slowly and gently and plan for the long term. You can even return to like old passion projects, revisit abandoned plans and reformulate these plans with long-term goals in mind. No impulsivity at this time. We want to think long-term. Mars is moving slowly when it's retrograde. We want to go back over something that we either left behind or haven't touched or maybe we forgot about for a while. Go back to it, revisit it, make it better, and redirect. It's a great time for redirecting. These are just some ideas for how to make this time work a little bit better for you, to hopefully mitigate some of the potential challenges and spin it around to go in a more positive direction. I've written a pretty extensive forecast, like more extensive than I thought it would be, and I've talked about a lot of it here, but I wrote that on Substack. There's also horoscopes on there that talk about what each sign is likely to be feeling during this time, as well as a pretty extensive list of remediations specific to each sign, like things you can do to make the best of this time or to like almost indirectly prevent the more challenging parts of Mars retrograde in Leo from biting you. Hopefully this was helpful, and I appreciate you being here, and I'm going to say the annoying thing that everybody says, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm looking forward to actually building up this channel. It's felt really great to be able to talk without limiting myself or feeling like I have to dance for the fucking algorithm. Good luck with this retrograde, and let us know how it all turns out for you.